Today's lecture is on proprioceptors. Proprioceptors is their name is muscle spindles, Golgi tendon organs. Proprioceptors, why we call proprioceptors? Because they are responsible for the maintain or regulate the movement and the change in the position of the different part of the body. Means responsible for posture movements also. And kinesthetic response because they are present in the body tissue and they are responsible for movements. Their body tissue they are present is muscle, tendon, joint, capsule itself. Types of the proprioceptors, there are 5 types of the proprioceptors: muscle spindles, Golgi tendon organs, Pacinian corpuscles, free nerve endings, and labyrinthine receptors. Now, in this lecture, we will learn only about the muscle spindles and the Golgi tendon organs. Muscle spindles, they are present in the skeletal muscles, and the tendon organs, they are present in the tendon of the skeletal muscles. Now, first we will take about the muscle spindles. Muscle spindles, they are also known as intrafusal muscle fibers. So, whatever we have learned till now in the skeletal muscle fibers, they are the extrafusal fibers. They are formed by the actin and myosin filaments. But muscle spindles are the intrafusal muscle fibers, and they are lying parallel to the extrafusal fibers. It is thin, it is striated, spindle shaped, and modified skeletal muscle fibers. There are 2 types, nuclear bag fibers and nuclear chain fibers. As the name indicates, it's collection of the nuclei in bag in the central part. That's why it is known as nuclear bag fibers. Nuclear chain fibers, the nuclei are arranged in the chain form. Nuclear bag fibers again divided into 2. One is the dynamic nuclear bag fibers, second is static nuclear fiber. As the name indicates, dynamic is responsible for change in the movement, a change in the speed of the length, and the static for the sustained contraction. So they are responsible for, they activated only when they are sustained contraction. So the nuclear chain fibers and the nuclear bag fibers, they are the 2 types of the muscle spindle. Now their number are 5 to 12 in number, and they are capsulated structure and parallel to the extrafusal fibers. Now whenever there is a fine movements required to maintain the length of the finer scale movements, then number of the muscle spindles are much more in comparison to less skill movements required. Now the back portion, or you can see central portion of the muscle spindle, is non-contractile in nature, while the end portion or on either side of the center portion, it contracts. So it is of center portion non-contractile, and either side it is contractile and surrounded by the fluid. So this is a sense organ. This is the muscle spindle, interfusal fibers capsulated, and this is extrafusal fibers. The part of this is the white in color is tendon. And skeletal muscles is attached to the bone through the tendon. Now whenever there is a stretching of or initial length is changed, this is a relaxed state, only few impulses are generated. When contracted, initial stage, when stretched, then what will happen? Length is changed, then this part is also stretched, and once it is stretched, it gets stimulated. Afferent impulses in the action potential is generated, and impulses travel through the afferent sensory nerve. So, whenever there is a stretching of the extrafusal fibers, intrafusal fibers also get stimulated. And here you will find more impulse generated. Reverse of that, once there is a contraction of the extrafusal fibers, then you will find there is less stimulation. Signal more when stretched and signal are less when muscle is contracted. Now remember by your heart, it is the only receptor in the body which has both sensory and motor supply. So this muscle spindle has both supply, sensory as well as motor supply. Now we will take one by one, sensory part first. Sensory nerve supply is of two types. Type 1A, that is primary sensory nerve fibers. Secondary sensory nerve fibers, group 2. The primary sensory nerve fibers, it branched into two and it supplied two types of the fibers. One is nuclear bag, dynamic nuclear bag fibers. Second, nuclear chain fibers. So nuclear chain fibers and dynamic nuclear bag fibers. Secondary sensory nerve fibers, group 2, is supplied nuclear chain fibers and static nuclear bag fibers. So both fibers, nuclear bag fibers, whether it is dynamic or static, functions are different. Supplied is different. Now the ending of the nerve fibers, usually in the flower spray, ending in the nuclear chain fibers. And in bag fibers, it is end plate type. So type 1A, afferent from dynamic. Afferents are responsible for dynamic response. It is very sensitive to the change in the velocity in the length during a stretch. So speed of the movement is, you can see, provide information via the type 1A fibers. So type A1 fibers give the information of speed of the group 2 fibers. They sense the static response. They sense about static response. So in detailed structure you will find this is a muscle spindle structure, intrafusal fiber. It is of two types, nuclear bag fibers, nuclear chain fibers. Nuclear bag fibers receives afferent, transmits the afferent fibers to the alpha motor neuron and then to the extrafusal fibers. So this muscle is a skeletal muscle fibers, is extrafusal fibers. This is intrafusal fibers. Okay. So this intrafusal fibers through the afferent type 1A group 2, it is responsible for give information to the alpha motor neuron, and these constitute 70% fibers to the relay to the alpha motor neuron, because this is the neuron through the axon information goes to the muscle fibers, extra muscle fibers, extrafusal muscle fibers, and responsible for the muscle contraction. Now the same muscle spindle also receives information from the efferent, that is gamma motor neuron. Gamma motor neuron constitute 30%. of the fibers in the ventral root. 70% is from sensory fibers and the 30% motor fibers. This 70 fibers is through the alpha motor neuron, which goes to the extrafusal fibers, and 30% through the gamma motor neuron and goes to the extrafusal fibers. So how this gamma efferent is responsible? Now that I will, the other picture, it will be clear to you that in the anterior motor nuclei, the maximal number is alpha motor neuron and less is gamma motor neuron. Gamma motor neuron, whenever there is a discharge to the extrafusal fibers through the alpha motor neuron, a collateral goes to the gamma motor neuron. A gamma motor neuron, via the inhibitory interneuron, it acts on the reverbatory act on the alpha motor neuron. So collateral from this nuclei goes to the gamma motor, and gamma motor again inhibit the alpha motor neuron. So this is a reverbatory circle which is formed, and the feedback is such an appropriate that there is no neither increase in the tone or length. Excessive length is not changed and excessive tone is not changed here. So the gamma motor neuron, this gamma motor neuron, which is present in the anterior motor neuron, they supply to the muscle spindles and or the muscle spindle fibers and responsible for tone. So the motor nerve fibers, in this slide it is very clear, motor nerve fibers is two types, for dynamic gamma motor neurons, efferent, and static gamma motor neuron. Now function is they prevent overstretching of the muscles, number one, and this is receptor is for stretch reflexes. An important thing is muscle tone. It is responsible for muscle tone. So these are the function of the muscle spindle. These are the function of the sensory afferents and the sensory efferents. Now to the muscle spindle. And all 3 points, that is, a prevent overstretching, stretch reflexes, and the muscle tone, are very important function of the muscle. Again, there is in this diagram you will find type 1A and group 2. These are the afferent, and the green one is the motor efferent. And these are intrafusal fibers and alpha motor neuron. The relay of this controls the extrafusal, while the motor is responsible for this. By the reverbatory circle or by this chart, you can see resting stage, the length increases. Once the length increases of the muscle fibers, muscle spindle also increases stretch, more stimulation of the alpha motor neuron, and the length decreases. Once the length decreases, then muscle length decreases due to the contraction, inhibition from the muscle spindle, and muscle length is optimized. Now this is the basis of the reflex also. How? This is the muscle spindle, 1A fibers, type 2 fibers, and then alpha motor neuron and extrafusal fibers, motor end plate and extrafusal fibers. This is one circle. Second circle, the Golgi end organs, that 1B fibers. Through the 1B fibers, again the sensation goes to the alpha motor neuron, but in this time it is through the interneuron, It is through interneurons. It is not direct relay to the alpha motor neuron. It is through the interneuron. So interneuron neurotransmitter is GABA, and it is responsible for inhibitory postsynaptic potential. So it will inhibit the alpha motor neuron, discharge is decreases, less contraction, and tone is optimized. So this is the basis of the reflex and constitute 5 components constitute reflex arc, which will be taught you later, but 5 things, that is the receptor, muscle spindle, afferent, center, efferent, and effector organ. So these are the 5s, and in the monosynaptic reflexes, the receptor is muscle spindle. It is not Golgi and tendon organ. It is muscle spindle, which is mainly responsible for this. So this is an introductory of the reflex. The stretch reflex receptor for the stretch reflex is muscle spindle. It is a myotatic reflex. It is monosynaptic reflex and quickest reflex. Why we say monosynaptic? Only one synapse is here in the spinal cord. Quickest because it is conveyed by the 1A and group 2 type of the sensory fibers. So it is responsible for maintaining the posture, prolonged contraction of the anti-gravity muscles, and it is responsible for change in the length of the muscle by stretching, and it is also responsible for continuous contraction. Now, what is a physiological tremor? 3 things you must remember: continuous discharge, second, low voltage, third, no rhythmic frequency. Fourth thing, that from primary and secondary sensory nerve fibers of the muscle spindle. And fifth thing, at the resting condition. The physiological tremor is invisible. We cannot see by the naked eye, but it is play important role in the feedback regulation of the muscle length. It play very important role in feedback regulation of the muscle length. So it is a continuous discharge of the low voltage with there is no rhythmicity, and this is the due to the primary and secondary sensory nerve fibers of the muscle spindle, and this is done at the resting stage. What is the role of the muscle spindle in maintaining the muscle tone? First, you must learn the definition of the muscle tone. It is a partial resistance offered during passive movement. No effect of the gravity, passive movement of the muscles in the relaxed state is called muscle tone. It is due to the continuous discharge of the impulses from the gamma motor neuron. Okay? Gamma motor neuron always give discharge to the intrafusal fibers, and they regulate the contraction of the extrafusal fibers. So this is Golgi and tendon through the 1B fibers goes to the interneuron, inhibit the alpha motor neuron, and the contraction is maintained. Adjusted, you can see. GolgiTendon organ, they are so present in the tendon, and they are in series with the extrafusal fibers. They are covered with the capsule, encapsulated. Sensory supply type 1B, and ends are ramified and form a knob. So the function is to detect change in the force or tension. Important thing that GolgiTendon organ is a receptor of for inverse stretch reflex. For the stretch reflex, which is the receptor? Muscle spindle. For the inverse stretch reflex, which is the receptor? Golgi tendon. So it maintains the force of contraction. As I told you, again a reverberative cycle. Powerful contraction of the muscles, increased tension in the muscle, means increased sensory impulses via the 1B, type 1B, to the inhibitory interneuron, IPSP developed and decreases the impulses to the alpha motor neuron, which decreases the contraction. Very well documented by this diagram. Golgi and tendon, 1B fiber, they travel through the dorsal root and then interneuron, release of the neurotransmitter GABA. It is inhibitory interneuron to the alpha motor neuron because IPSP is developed here. Discharge of the alpha motor neuron is changed and slightly decreased and supplied to the extrafusal fibers. Contraction of the muscle fibers is optimized. So this is the cycle of the Golgi tendon organ and alpha motor neuron. Another thing is muscle spindle, alpha motor neuron directly relate to the muscle spindle type 1A and group 2 fibers goes to the alpha motor neuron, and the discharge there is a more contraction. So more contraction by the muscle spindle, less contraction by the Golgi and tendon. So the Golgi tendon organ is responsible for tone, or it optimizes the contraction or inhibitory to the alpha motor neuron. So this is the basis which I have learned about the muscle spindle, reflex, how to maintain the length and tone. Thanking you.